this is our first attempt at becoming an influencer because that seems to be how everyone does things. Not gonna lie, I really hate this already. But for now, we're gonna chat through, I think, the unpleasant truths for exactly how businesses run. Because the big secret behind it is that your business is not special. Don't get me wrong, it's an absolute pain in the ass to build it. No argument, no criticism there. I've done this 5 times because I hate myself. And it never gets any easier. And every single time that I do it, it feels like a completely new and unique nightmare. Uh, and then as soon as I look back on it, I realize it's just because I just made the same mistakes as the previous 4. But in a nutshell, businesses pretty much always scale the same way. Step 1, figure out if the idea is good, which means, do people want your thing? Can you get your thing? Can you get your thing to the people that want your thing for less than it costs you to get your thing? If you answered yes to all 3 questions, you have a business. Step 2, can you do that a lot? Like, can you do that many, many times, frequently? And then you start getting into a balancing act between, cool, it's more efficient to spend money upfront or in a fixed rate to do that, but I sell it at a variable rate, and you start getting into the math. But for the first part, so long as you have good market fit, you don't think too hard about it. And that's basically the 0 to 2 million mark. So from between 0 and 2 million, yes, you can dial things in, and everyone puts effort into figuring out what their operating expenses are and figuring out what their key sales drivers are and trying to find better market fit. But from 0 to 2 million, you are figuring out what market fit is by throwing fecal matter at the wall. Once you get there, however, almost every business starts to hit a plateau. So around that 2 million point, you're gonna hit a wall. And that wall is always that there are too many holes in the bucket. So think about how you're building this. You're pouring water into this bucket as fast as possible, and you don't really pay a whole lot of attention to how the bucket is structured to begin with. So the end result is that you're doing a lot of things that are slightly inefficient, and you are managing all of them. And you just keep bailing or adding duct tape to that bucket every time you notice a new hole. But realistically, the design of the bucket is not good. And this is usually the first point that stymies businesses, which is why like 90% of all businesses are going to be 2 million or less, and they're all going to get up to that point and they're going to stop. And it's because the skill set that it takes to build a business up to that point is completely different than the skill set it takes to scale beyond that point. Now, there are exceptions. If you have an absolutely wild margin, perfect market fit, or just happen to be in the right industry, there are many cases where you'll scale past it without ever knowing that you should have been screwed by now. But for the vast majority of us, this is the first point where you really need to pause and then reevaluate, what am I spending my time on? What am I spending money on? What of the things that I'm doing is working? What of the things that I'm doing is a complete waste of time? What of the things that I'm doing is actually actively harming me? Do I have any data to prove any of those theories? And this is usually the point where you want a CFO. I don't think anyone actually knows what a CFO is, because every time I ever talk to somebody about this, they just tell me they already have an accountant. An accountant is functionally a spreadsheet with like ChatGPT 2. I'm sorry, accounting industry, you're welcome to come at me. There are some great ones. I have a phenomenal one for each of my companies, but it took me like 7 to get there. Like, I used to fire my accountant every single year. An accountant will take the numbers that you give them and they will put them into columns and they will tell you this is what it means for your taxes. And a good accountant will tell you that if you put it in a slightly different column, it would mean something better for your taxes. But they're not going to come back to you and say, here's the leading indicators for how your business is doing based off of the books and then the receipts that you had and the correlation with the sales data. And I took all the numbers and I tied it together. And the gist of it is these particular sales channels pay better. These particular types of customers are more valuable. Realistically, you're going to want to focus your efforts on this. You can probably cut this entire service line because the costs associated with it scale too quickly, meaning that it's never, ever going to become profitable. And it hits inflection points at inconvenient times where you're going to have to make massive fixed CapEx expenditures in order to keep growing it. And it's never going to get ahead of those. That's a CFO. A CFO is the person who says, here, you've been in business for years. You have scaled up to a nice, comfortable level where we know that people want the product and we know that we can make a profit. Here's how you did it. Here's the completely robbed of romance version of how you did it. You solved this math problem you did not know existed. And so that is usually the $2 million inflection point. It is, what did you do that worked?